Businesses thrive by knowing customer insights because today's insights are tomorrow's facts. At iResearch, we live and breathe insights. And despite searching high and low, we were unable to find a customer insights podcast that answers one of the most important questions in business. Why do customers do what they do? So we launched one. Hi, I'm your host, Darshan Mehta.
Today, I'm going to be talking to Vashte Johnson. She is an insights visualization consultant with over 15 years of conducting qual and quant consumer research and visualizing insights for hundreds of researchers and research companies. She is the founder of Slidedesignr, a market research, advertising, and marketing and business services company focused on building powerful insights, deliverables that are impressing clients and making a difference. Vashte's company creates decks that help leaders make decisions, innovate, inspire teams, and bring products and services to life. At Slidedesignr, using the unique Insights Accelerator model that she has created, she helps a wide variety of clients with consumer insights that are professionals, full-service providers, and major brands that create PowerPoint reports with their internal and external clients. And they love her deeply and value her presentations. Welcome, Vashte. Nice to talk to you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Darshan.
I'm curious, throughout your career, but what actually led you to becoming an insights visualization expert?
It was the thing that I found that folks in our industry, I was hearing a lot of frustration around it, and I was hearing a lot of confusion around it, and I was hearing just that need for that ability to take insights and visualize them. But what I was seeing was that, there's a few things, right? We have really tight deadlines in our industry. So these things just have to get turned around quickly. So there's not a lot of time for learning how to do it. And a lot of folks we're doing it, we're learning on the job, right? And I felt like that's what was leading to a lot of the frustration of, we have to wear a lot of hats, right? We have to be consultants for our clients and provide good customer service and design research and write discussion guides and write questionnaires. And my day I used to program questionnaires and moderate groups and moderate IDIs. And sometimes you got to be a video editor, and sometimes you got to be able to edit photos, and you got to be able to create like all the things. And you have to be able to analyze and synthesize insights when you come out of field. And you have to be borderline a professional graphic designer to like put all those things into a format that our clients can, one, understand, but two, that feels like is worthy of their research spend. Right. So our clients spend, tens of thousands of dollars with us, if not more. And sometimes they get back a deck that it looks amateurish, frankly. Right. And so I was hearing a lot of that pain around that. And I felt like, because in my background's a little bit all over the place, but just, kind of long story short, I've always been an artist. And when I was, tasked with working on decks, it just kind of naturally came forward that, well, I was good at creating slides. And I was at a point in my career when I was wondering, what do I want to do next? And how can I differentiate myself? And I didn't feel like it was by becoming a freelance moderator or, a freelance, doing projects in qual or quant. I felt like the place where I could do the most good and provide the most value was by trying to figure out this deliverables problem.
But I want to go back to where you started. You started as a focus group respondent in 2006.
I did,
and what was the aha moment that led you to say, hey, I like this and I want to get into this industry?
Yeah. So I think my boss had the aha moment first about me because I'm in this focus group. I had been before that a mechanical engineer and found that wasn't my calling. It tickled my left brain. But like I said, I've been an artist my whole life. And unless I can do something that's both left and right brain, I'm really not happy. Thankfully, this does. But okay, so table that for now. But so I found myself in this focus group. I got a call from like Facts and Figures in Sherman Oaks, shout out, and, do a focus group about live music. And I had just gone to Coachella. So I was like, all right, yeah, I can talk about this, and make $75, whatever it was. Right. And I sat in this group and just had this conversation with people about my experiences. And I must have said something really cool because at the end, the moderator, Tom Bernthal, was like, hey, can you hang out for a second? I want to talk to you. And he had dismissed everyone at this point, and I was okay, sure, why not? And he was like, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know what I do. I'm an artist. I've got a degree in mechanical engineering. At the time, I was teaching a knitting class, like knitting and crochet. I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was going to Coachella and making art. Like I don't know what I do. And he's like, well, what about this? And I'm like, I don't know what this is. What do you just talk to people? Like, what is this? Is this a job even? And after a few more conversations with him and his partners at Kelton Research, that's why I started. I got brought in, and we were so small at the time. The LA office was something like 10 people. I don't remember exactly, but it was so small that everybody wore every hat and was conducting research, designing research, everything from A to Z. So I learned everything on the job from those guys, and internally grateful for that. But I mean, the aha moment was really like, I like this. And this is a thing that does the left brain, right brain thing for me, right? It's analytical, and there's an art to it when it comes to how you represent those things visually for our clients into, a way that they can actually use, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know the feeling because I remember when I first got exposed to it, and it's just really interesting, right? Because you learn a lot about people, products, industries, and in fact, a lot about yourself too, right? Because you're doing this research.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious. The word insights is used a lot in the industry and a lot in business now.
Yeah.
How do you, as a visualization expert, define insight? Because there's many definitions of it. How do you define it?
For us in our industry, an insight is a tool. It's a thing that has practical use for our clients. So what an insight is not is like accumulated facts that you found in the research, right? We can accumulate facts. We can make observations. We can answer questions. We all get the long list of objectives and then answer the questions. Yes, they do. No, they don't. Well, this is the rank order of that. We can answer questions one-to-one, but those aren't insights because those aren't tools, again, that have practical use for our clients, right? What we kind of do as researchers, like we look at all of those facts that we accumulate and those observations we make, and we synthesize a message from the relationship between those things. And that message starts to get close to something like an insight. But that to me doesn't really like clear the bar for insight for me, not yet, right? Because it has to live in that context of what is our client's big problem that they are trying to solve. Because these facts, this message, depending on the client's problem, it could be a hammer if their problem is a nail. It could be a wrench if their problem is a hex bolt, right? So we kind of have to live in the context of, given this problem, how can this thing be used, right? Otherwise, it's just facts. And so you'll see people create decks where it's like the what and then the so what. And it's like, we've got it flipped. The so what is the thing that should come first. That's what matters, because unless it's a so what, it's not really an insight, right? If it can't be used immediately to solve that problem, then it's just more facts we've accumulated. Does that make sense, right? Like,
I agree. This is tough. I know.
Yeah,
So
it's a tough thing
I've thought
because
about this a lot, and to me, I agree with you. I think people stop often at facts as being an insight, and it's not. It's just
yes,
part of it, and so it's a combination
yes,
of facts, trends, kind of a flow of things. But the best example I can give people, and I'd be curious what you think of this, is
yeah,
a really good comedian who
yeah,
takes something from here and here, puts it
yes,
together, and makes you say, "Oh my God, that's so
yeah,
true," but I never thought of
100%.
that. That is
Yes,
an insight, right?
yeah,
I mean, that is
exactly.
an insight because it's really taking the combination of things and observations and everything and actually revealing, or I would say articulating, a core truth
Yeah,
that's really driving something. And
yeah,
that's an insight.
exactly. That's an insight. And what that does is it lets people literally see what you're saying, right? But like, look at that phrase, like, I see what you're saying. I can visualize in my mind's eye what you're saying. That's not going to be a list of words on the page. That's going to be something that has a visual framework So one of the things that, to me, like I said, it doesn't clear the bar of insights unless it's a tool, but what makes something a tool is if it lives in a logical framework. So this happens, there's many ways to do it, but here's some examples, right? Like you might have in your research, well, this happens and then this happens and then this happens, right? Like a customer journey or something, right? You might have something where it's like, this is the most urgent, and then this is least urgent, and then this is the least urgent way of solving this problem. But you may have something that gets a bit more into our target customer's emotional state. And like you say, kind of blends those two things of the human experience and kind of what we've observed in the research and trends and things like that. So you might have a fact that's something like busy moms care about feeding their families healthy food. All right, that's fact. We all know that. Like, so what?
All right. What's driving it?
Exactly. And so if you took a step back and really tried to make those connections, not just in the data, but with what you know as a human being, and with what you know, even you might layer on some trend research, you might be able to say something like, well, what this busy mom cares about is she's frustrated that she's spending so much time on this. How can we help save her time in preparing healthy meals? Right? Here's what we found in the research. She's frustrated that she's spending time on this. Here's 3 slides with the supporting data. But that big key idea that C-suite is going to remember is like, oh yeah, she's frustrated about time. But I need to connect that with the next idea. And here's where I see kind of an opportunity in a lot of decks that I look at is forming that connection between those insights and creating that framework. So save her time, but also save her effort, save her guesswork, save her frustration by doing XYZ, right? But what's underpinning all of that? Is there something more foundational to her? Well, this also has to be something that instills trust in her. This has to be something that she feels she can rely on. This has to be, you know what I mean? It has to be something that she perceives as being, because her greatest fear, of course, is that something could harm her, whatever it is, right? And if you don't clear that bar, then none of the other stuff matters.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a dilemma, right? There's limited time for this individual. She's a mom, but she's also probably a full-time, employee or worker somewhere or entrepreneur. But she still wants to make sure her kids are fed well. How do you solve that problem? And if you understand both, then you understand that it's not just saving time, but also instilling the confidence that the time spent cooking is going to be resulting in a nutritional, healthy meal.
And now you're getting kind of an idea of how to visualize that thing. And that's why I emphasize framework so much and making sure that people can see what you're saying. Because if I can create a framework around that, I said something was foundational. To me, that goes on the bottom of the slide. That's a foundation, right? And the other things are going to be supported by that. That's something I can show someone, busy C-suite marketing person, whoever that is, product person. That's something that that's going to stick in their mind when they go into their next meeting and talk about this thing. How do we solve this problem? They're going to be smarter for it because those 3 things I just said, the time, the effort, the trust, they're going to be able to speak about that really clearly and succinctly in their next meeting. And I didn't force them through 40 slides of key findings to get there, right? I gave it to them right up front and then said, okay, now here's the data that supports all that, because everything we say has to be supported. You can't just make wild claims. But if you don't find the logical structure, I call it the idea hierarchy between your insights, you're leaving that on the table. You're leaving that buried. And so you got to dig a little bit deeper and find that. And that's where the gold is.
And the one thing I wanted to also talk about with insights with you is often people think insights need to be earth-shattering or completely in left field. And I often say it's not the case at all. It's something that is swimming around in your conscious. You kind of maybe have felt it, thought it, but an insight is the articulation of all of that in a manner that you say, I get it now. That I understand. And then I think what you're doing is quite interesting because now you're taking that and you need to recreate it visually so that someone who wasn't there during the research now can feel it, perhaps even emotionally, and to see it visually, combine the two and say, now I get it. and this is the data, this is the things that are supporting it. So they get a full 360 of it.
Yeah, exactly. Those things, the things that make our content work are the things that make the visuals work. So I would say, gosh, like 95% of the time when I look at someone's deck and they think they have a design problem, they don't have a design problem. They have a problem in their idea hierarchy. Because the kinds of questions I'll ask about a slide, they'll say, "Oh, just make it pretty." And it's like, well, okay, but what's the main idea here? And I might get silence or a speech. And it's like, okay, wait, can you summarize the slide in one sentence? I asked someone once if he could summarize his deck in one sentence, and he told me that wasn't possible. And right into me, I'm like, well, what's the elevator pitch of the answer that you found, right? If you're in an elevator with your client, what did you find? You're going to give them a speech, or do you have kind of a one sentence summary of those insights in that framework, right? That like we just did, time, effort, trust, we just did it, right? You can do that for most things. And it's going to be in that content. It's going to be if your ideas are logical, if they're kind of, think about it this way, right? One of the ways that we consume information is in a book or like in an article. So we can only consume information one sentence at a time as we read, right? And each sentence contains an idea. Okay. Well, groupings of sentences are called paragraphs. And each paragraph has an idea. It has like a topic sentence that summarizes the paragraph, right? And a sentence doesn't belong in that paragraph because you're like, this isn't the same topic. It goes in a different paragraph, right? And then those paragraphs might go together in a section under a heading, right? And you would know a paragraph didn't belong in that heading because that doesn't logically make sense. That doesn't follow from. And then all those headings belong in that article, right? Because the title is XYZ. And you would go, well, what's this section doing in this article? That doesn't tell me anything about economics or whatever the article is about, right? Now he's talking about making cake. It doesn't make sense. Well, our decks are the same way, right? They are the same logical groupings and the same logical orderings and in that order. It's just that, a section is a section of slides, right? It's just that a paragraph is a slide. A slide is a paragraph. That's all it is. And what they call the takeaway, I try not to use that because I find it's more confusing than anything. But the sort of main idea of that slide is the thing that summarizes that whole slide. And if it doesn't fit under that summary, it doesn't belong on that slide. So that's why I ask those questions of my clients and go, okay, well, what's the main idea of this slide? Because then you start going, well, that doesn't belong here, that doesn't belong here, that doesn't belong here. And what an irresponsible or inexperienced or somebody who's not in research designer might do is just take that slide and make it look pretty. Well, you've helped exactly no one because you just took, a paragraph that made no sense and put some shine on it. Yeah, who cares? So what? So this is why I dig into the content and the idea hierarchy so much before we even start talking about, okay, here's how we elevate that with design, right? And those things that has nothing to do with PowerPoint or colors or shapes or icons or any of that.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes in research, the kind of the quandary people fall into is there are lots of things we'd be interested in knowing, right?
Yeah.
But
right.
then you say, well, okay, you know that, but what can you do with it, right?
Yes.
And so, you have limited time to talk to people, to research, ask questions. So you want to be as focused as possible because you need to get at. So I often ask clients, if you could only find out only one thing, if you only answer one question out of all these focus groups, what would it be? And they say, no, I want to do lots of things. I understand.
Yeah.
But there's only one thing. What would that one
Yes.
thing be, right? Then we can
Yes.
add other things, but we want to make sure we get at that one thing at a deeper level, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious, going back to you're in a focus group, you get started,
Yeah.
you get enticed to be in this industry, but then you decide to focus even more on visualization of the insights.
Yeah.
And what specifically made you realize that that is an area that needs work, and that's something that you definitely want to focus on?
Two things. So I after Kelton, I worked at Honda R&D, and so there we're presenting to an audience that was somewhere from Japan and somewhere from America. So there was some with English as a second or third language, some English native speakers. We even had live translators in the room when we would present. It was really cool. So in your ear, you'd have your translator going off, and it was an interesting experience. But one of the first things that happened when I, got to the point where I think I first presented to my division director, and thankfully it was kind of a smaller meeting because that deck, what I had been used to is presenting to all English speakers. So I was used to writing kind of a witty term or phrase and just kind of like this prose and like these long sort of like, oh, isn't this kind of interesting? And it didn't go over at all. And it was seen as kind of insulting. And it was just, no, this has to be made more visual. What are you doing? And so I completely like that check. It was called a division director check. I failed that and had to go back to my desk and rework that entire deck. And that pain, like that stuck with me. Because I was so proud of this thing and it was like, burn. No. And so that was a lesson of like, okay, well, if you can't rely on sentences and the written word, what do you do? Right. And so I developed a, way of dealing with that now, but it took me a while to get there but that was when that kind of light bulb first went off of like, okay, here's a problem to be solved. And that's what I've been working on ever since. But after Honda R&D, I was thinking of being, a freelance moderator and kind of, helping out with research here and there. I did some car clinics and things and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And maybe it's a little bit cheesy, but there was in our office at Honda a poster or something on the wall with a quote from Suichiro Honda, the founder of Honda. And it was like, what is the thing that only we can do? And that was something that drove us at Honda in our actual design work when it came to features, when it came to innovating. It was like, well, what is the thing that only Honda can do? Not the thing that we're going to, we're not going to copy the other guys. We're not just going to take this thing and evolve it. What's the thing that's so Honda, only Honda would do it? And I had to think like, what's the thing that's so me that only I could do it and no one else can do? And I like moderating, but it's not being another moderator. And I know some great moderators and I was like, and they probably have a passion for it. And I didn't have a passion for it the way I perceived they did. That's what also caused me to leave engineering. I was like, I like this, but I don't have a passion for it the way the other engineers around me have a passion for it. But I do have a passion for helping with decks. Like, I like this. Like I said, it's analytical and it's art, right? It's, I can go paint or do sketches or whatever, or, play music. I was in a band at the time as well. But this is kind of tickling that part of me that needs to do both at the same time. And I don't see anyone else doing it not this way. So maybe there's a space for me here, right? To try to combine my background in consumer insights with art and design into a service that only helps people in insights. I don't want to do, you know what I mean? Just general graphic design, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a graphic designer, didn't go to design school. You know what I mean? That's not me. But can I combine these two things and create something new, right? And I was really, really excited about that. So I went for it.
Because that's what has led now to the Insights Accelerator model that you've developed, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about that. What exactly is the Insight Accelerator model and how to use it?
Yeah. So there's four things that no matter what, if you want to create consistently powerful deliverables, I mean, like not hit or miss, like not sometimes a deck lands, sometimes it doesn't, consistently powerful. There's four things you have to do. And just to kind of take a step back, the reason why I developed the model is because there were some problems I was seeing across the board. So after doing this and working with, everybody from smaller shops to bigger, insights companies to client side, just I was kind of seeing the same problems being repeated over and over and over. And one of them was sacrificing time. So folks don't leave enough time for deliverables. We come out of field and then you say, hey, the report's due in 2 weeks. We got 2 weeks to create this thing. One of the key ingredients to a powerful deliverable is time, because you need time to think and form those connections that we talked about, right? And you kind of can't force yourself to do it. Like I have some of my biggest aha moments at the gym uh, right? Taking a walk in the shower, right? Like making food. So it's just, you have to give yourself the time. I've come up with solutions to a deck where I couldn't find the connection between three insights and find that framework. I found them in a dream before, right? And woke up and went, oh, that's it. Right. So, and that's so esoteric. That's not a thing you can tell your client, oh, sorry, I got to dream about it for a week. Like you can't really do that. And so you have to give yourself the space and the time to be a human being who needs to sit with this stuff and have a life and get enough sleep and eat right and be able to form these connections. So time is so important. The other thing that I was seeing was that folks were relying on design to do the heavy lifting of the idea hierarchy, right? So they weren't giving themselves, again, time is that ingredient to dive deep and find those insights and create those frameworks because they were trying to do that and design slides at the same time. So I was seeing in their process this messiness of, I write an outline and then I put all those things on slides and then I design the slides and I see what fits and what doesn't fit. And then I spend a lot of time designing this slide and I find it doesn't fit. So I throw it away and I'm like, wait, you spent 3 hours on that slide. You threw it. Why did you design it? You shouldn't have don't design anything until you've got you know exactly what you're here to say and what your storyline is, right? So I just saw so much messiness in the process that it was taking the short amount of time that you already ain't got no time. You already have no time. So, right. And so you're staying up late and you're spending time on weekends and you're still coming out with a product that looks amateurish, unfortunately. If your client spends the equivalent of like a BMW on research with you, I feel like, because the deck is the thing that lives on, after everybody's drank the wine and had the snacks in the back room and seen the focus groups, the deck is what lives on. And that's what everybody's going to remember, right? And if that doesn't capture the tools that we talked about, they didn't get their $70,000, $100,000 worth out of that research engagement. That to me is not a win, right? And so it's the most important thing, and it was left to the end. And so I wanted to create a framework that would reclaim some of that time, that would enable my clients to form those deep connections, because those deep connections are what drive the beautiful visuals that make it so our clients can see what we're saying. And so it starts as soon as you want a research engagement, you can start on a deliverable. Don't wait till the last 2 weeks, right? So the 4 steps. The first one is to have the mindset of a consultant who is the expert, right? Your clients have hired you to find them an answer to a big, big, big question. If they could do it themselves, they would, right? But they can't. They hired you. You're the expert.
Yeah, to solve a problem. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what you're here for. And I find that too many people will create decks that have tons of accumulated facts, tons of answers to objectives, key themes. And then it's like the deck is in the order of the discussion guide or the questionnaire, or it's in the order of things I found interesting, or it's in the order of things I heard the most, which is a weird one. I don't know why that one is so prevalent, but things I heard the most is not a thing. Side note. but essentially what you're doing then is you're telling your client, here, you tell me what this means, right? And that's not the mindset of a consultant. That's our job. Even as somebody who's more junior, if you're presenting to somebody internally, your boss, have the mindset of a consultant, and you'll find yourself become indispensable. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is to understand that audience. So do a deep dive into the people you're presenting to, the stakeholders. So not just your direct client who may be in kind of a research role. Maybe they like tons of data to sift through and all of that. And that's cool. Like you can absolutely deliver that. But who are the other stakeholders who they're going to be presenting to? C-suite is a safe bet, right? But you may have marketing folks in the room who are worried about an upcoming social media campaign. You may have product folks who are wondering if we should go with this or that and, what to improve or what to develop. You may have, again, C-suite who's wondering what to invest in. You may have engineering folks in the room. You may have retail folks in the room. You may have a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different interests based on their roles, right? And you may also have a lot of humans in the room, don't forget, who have a lot of interests based on more emotional and financial and what I call survival drivers. I'm a big fan of Donald Miller. He wrote the book Building a Story Brand, several other books, but that's been a key one that I refer to again and again, because it's so true that the things that drive us, the things that help us separate the signal from the noise, even in day to day, when you're scrolling through Facebook or you're looking on LinkedIn or whatever, the things that catch your eye are the things that subliminally that you see as key to your survival. Whether it's something you think is going to make you more money, put more food on the table, get a raise or promotion, get more recognition or respect from your peers, right? Something that might help you form more connections with people and be more accepted. These are all survival mechanisms that as human beings we need, that you may not think people are looking for in your deck, but they absolutely are. They're looking for, what's the thing that's going to make me smarter? What's the thing that I'm going to go in my next meeting and say the cool, smart thing that's going to get me potentially a good review or a raise next quarter, right? Like these are human beings we're presenting to.
Right. Right. And they have their own motivating factors and drivers.
Yeah, exactly. I always ask my clients when we first start an engagement about, our direct client, it's like, well, what do they want? Oh, well, they're new. Oh, really? They just started their role. Yeah. They probably want to make a good first impression. Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be part of our North Star for this deck, is helping our direct client, right, impress whoever these stakeholders are and give them this tool, again, that they can use to do that and go in there and win as sort of the hero of this story. And so what I'm trying to create with the deep dive into the audience is a bit of a recognition of the meta story that surrounds the deck. So people talk about storytelling, and I have issues with that because I feel like it's led people down a weird path where they're trying to create the hero's journey of conjoint. Like they're trying to take research, sort of like design, and then the data that comes out of it and force it into a 3-act structure or something.
I think I know what you're saying. They want to have it fit an existing story as opposed to creating a new story.
Okay, so here's a story. A story is, there's a character and everything's right with the world. Everything's fine, right? Like Lion King. Okay, so all is right in Africa. Look, Mufasa is the king and all the animals are happy. Everything's great, except this big scary thing happens. Scar kills Mufasa. Everybody's thrown into chaos. But Simba's a tiny kitten. Like, what can you do about it? Seemingly nothing. He's a tiny kitten and Scar's like a huge lion. You know what I mean? Like, he can't do anything about it. But we watch the story unfold as he grows, and with his friends, they help him gain the ability and the confidence and the strength to be able to, because he has these guides, right? What are they? Timon and Pumbaa, right? Those are his guides, right? So he can become the hero who saves the day and restores the kingdom. Okay, so in the story that's surrounding the deck, we as researchers are those guides. We're guiding our client to become that hero, because the big scary thing that happens might be, oh no, this big competitor's coming and threatening to steal share from us. That's the big scary thing. That's like the big question we talked about, right? And if we can help them be the hero and give them the tools they need to be able to save the day, that's our role in the story. So that's the meta story that's surrounding the deck. What we can give them in that deck are ideas, right? In a framework that's logical, easy to see and remember and understand, so they can articulate it. So if you can string together your key themes in a sentence, you're like 90% of the way there. Like we talked about, like time and then effort, and then, but she needs trust. Like I just explained the whole deck. I can go in my next meeting and talk about how can we save her time? Okay, well, maybe we got to design our aisles differently. You know what I mean? That's what we mean by story, is kind of a logical framework that can then be visualized and understood and remembered by our clients. But we're the story.
Are you talking about defining key pillars to wrap the story around? Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. I mean, you've got to go through the insights. First of all, you have to uncover the insights, right? And they're not just delivered to you. Right? A lot of information is delivered, but the other thing convert into an insight, right? And then the other is then having key pillars that identify and give a framework to those insights. And that's where the storytelling begins. And that I agree with. I think sometimes people have a narrative that they've heard from somewhere else and they're trying to make it fit that narrative. And that's the story. But it's actually, you need to come up with these core pillars that, are embedded or part of the insights that you've uncovered.
Because we're always talking about human beings, right? And so there's always reasons why we do things. That they thought this was more important than that. Why? Well, because if they don't have that thing, this horrible thing might happen to them. Why does that matter? Well, because reasons, like we're talking about things that we all kind of know and understand as human beings. And I feel like sometimes when we get into analyzing or synthesizing research, we get into this mindset of like almost like we're analyzing rats in a vacuum or rats in a lab, right? Where it's like, if I only look at this data set in a vacuum, and it's like, we're talking about human beings, this. You know what it feels like to experience that. Okay, what's really going on here is a human experience. What's really going on here is something potentially philosophical. What's going on here is something that exists in the world we live in right now. What's going on right now that might be causing them to feel this way? Oh, interest rates went up. Yeah, okay, right? They're scared about that. Now we're talking. So that's kind of the third thing in a sort of a not quite a nutshell, but kind of trying to tie it back to some things we talked about earlier, because that really is that third step of creating that idea hierarchy. And once you have that, then you start talking about how to elevate that with design, right? Then you start talking about, okay, those sentences you wrote, about all those ideas that tied those things together. How do you visualize those things? That's the next step. And like I said, I saw people trying to do all of these things at the same time and coming out with an end product that wasn't the better for it. In fact, it was worse. That also gives you clear points where you can engage your client and get feedback, right? Like I send my clients my ideas before I even show them a single slide, but I don't want to show you my ideas until I've gone as deep as I can to unearth everything I can possibly find. So I'm going to do all of that work and not show you something half-baked, but I've given myself the space to do that because I'm not trying to do everything at once, right? So when you free yourself and you kind of give yourself that time and that self-respect too, right? Like I said, I got to sleep. I'm going to come up with some of this stuff in my dreams or at the gym. You can do actually better work than if you run yourself ragged trying to do everything at once. I promise you. Sometimes I'm at my desk and I'm just like staring at the ceiling. I promise you I'm working. I'm working hard.
No, that's true. I've learned in order to get from 0 to 100, you still have to go through, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the thing is, if you break it up into pieces, it makes it much easier. So I'm curious now, when you get to the end, you have all this information and you have the information pillars and stuff, and you're given the choice to synthesize them down to 6 or 3. Which option do you pick and why?
It depends. So between 6 and 3, if you have 6, more than likely, I like to be between 3 and 5. So for a couple reasons. So between 3 and 5 is easier for people to remember. If I gave you, 10 things to go get from me from the grocery store, you'd forget half of them. If I gave you one thing, you'd remember it. If I give you 3 things, you'd remember it. If I give you 5, you'd remember them. But after that, it starts to get a little hazy. You might not come back with my grade, right? So 3 to 5 is a good number just for human beings in general. Some of us are super freaks who can remember 20 things, but in general, right? If I have 6, sometimes I feel like 2 of those ideas maybe overlap logically. They probably are the same idea. Like in that paragraph analogy I gave you, or they might belong in the same section. If I wrote them in a slightly more succinct way, I could probably combine them into one sentence. So when I see 6, I go, I've got a little bit more work to do probably, right? If I see 5, I work really hard to make sure I don't have 4. Because if you have overlaps, then you're going to confuse people. Well, how come those 2 pillars overlap? That doesn't make any sense. You don't want to confuse people. So everything has to be mutually exclusive from each other. So 6 is a red flag to me.
I agree. I actually would push for 3 because I think there's the power of 3 that makes it so much easier for people to digest and to wrap around. And I think, when you start going beyond 3, I agree. You can maybe go to 5, but 4 and 5 are always, but 6, absolutely not. And that's even within slides. I think even within slides, I try to encourage people to stick with at least one key idea per slide, and not these slides where there's like 20 different bullet points and then they just read each bullet point. I mean, that's the killer. Yeah. Because even if people are looking at you, I guarantee they're not listening. Because when you're presenting, we're all humans again. There are competing thoughts all the time, even when we're presenting, right? You're thinking, hey, when is this going to be over? What am I going to have for lunch? Oh, I got to call, my kid later. There are all these competing thoughts that are always competing. And whenever you introduce any confusion visually or in text, those competing thoughts will sneak in.
Yeah. So there's the competing thoughts, and there's also the fact that people, no matter what, if you have all those bullet points, like you said, all those sentences on the page, they're not listening to you because they're trying to find the connection between all of them. They're trying to group them together into buckets. So they're trying to figure out the puzzle you just gave them. You just threw a bunch of puzzle pieces down and they're going, how do I put these together? Does that go with that? Does that go with this? How do those two think? Why are they next to each other? So there's two things. There's two ways I clean up a slide immediately. One is by grouping things logically. So visual proximity is a key to QS2 logical groupings, things that belong together, right? So if I gave you that grocery list again, I'd put the fruit over here. I'd put the dairy items here and I put the meat together. I wouldn't put the grapes with the bacon and the butter. And why would I have all these sentences together? I would have 3 sections on my slide. But how do I order them? Does fruit come first? Does dairy come first? Does meat come first? Well, the logical ordering on the slide visually should reflect what's going on with the content and that idea hierarchy, right? So in that insider and that key theme, whatever the thing is, well, okay, so what happens is this happens first, which causes this to happen, which causes that to happen. Cause and effect, that's an easy one. And if I have a cause and effect relationship on a slide, I'm going to go horizontal. That's a horizontal layout because we read left to right. Boom, boom, boom. Chronological, I'm also going to go left to right. Boom, 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 because time to us is on the x-axis, right? If you're comparing something, like 3 charts, then that's a situation where you might show 3 charts stacked together vertically so you can compare x-axis across and drop a line, but rare. Most often slide key, write this down. No, for everybody, it's a 3-column layout. Like you can't go wrong with showing 3 things, like you said, power of 3 horizontally. But you have to do the work to figure out, is this the logic? You can't willy-nilly just put stuff on a slide.
That's the thing. As you said earlier, it takes time. That's what takes time, right? To get to simplicity, because that's what you're striving for. To get to simplicity takes time.
Yes. Or your client will do it for you. That's the problem. You're forcing them to do the work for you. You're throwing puzzle pieces and they're going to sit there going, does this go over here? Does that?
I had a friend of mine who was in the finance business and he retired at a very young age of 40. And I asked him, what was the key to your success in finance? He said, well, when people are doing presentations, they're showing these numbers, these bar graphs and charts and stuff. And he realized they're of no value.
Yeah.
What's of real value is to not show the numbers, but to show the relationship between the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where the value was. He said, as a result of doing that, he was able to be very successful and was able to retire early.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
And that's what you're talking about. It's not just the number, it's actually showing the relationship. So you understand what's behind and what's driving these numbers.
Yes.
And that's a real challenge these days because we have a lot of data available to a lot of analytics.
Yeah.
And
100%.
It's actually paralyzing, right? It's paralyzing in many ways. It's useful, it's interesting, but a lot of that data is also telling you what people have done. It's still not telling you why they're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where, that's where you need both not only quant, but you really need the qual as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be able to narrate and talk about those relationships in a way that's not just, I call it narrating charts, where people will put down a bar chart and say, well, 38% of people think this is important. I'm like, why'd you write that? The chart says that. There's literally a 38 that says importance. I don't need you to write that on the slide. I need you to give me some depth. I need the relationships, like you said, right? But it's difficult to do that if you haven't figured out what pillars and ideas you're kind of laddering up to. I'm a big fan of Barbara Minto, pyramid principle. Shout out to her for kind of creating that way of thinking through this stuff methodically. And one of the things she says is really important. God, I'm going to paraphrase it, but she's like, you have to do the work to clarify your thinking before you can clarify your writing. Yeah. And I think that's the key, is like, we have to give ourselves the ability to clarify our thinking so that we can make clear slides for our clients, right? Because without that step, you'll end up just narrating charts.
Yeah, you have to do it in a way that actually makes people say, for example, a lot of times people say that baby boomers are aging, getting close to retirement age, right? Sure, that's one way to say it. But another way to say that is saying, baby boomers are realizing that they're a lot closer to their first Social Security check than they are to receiving their college diploma.
Yeah.
You see, and now I could have scripted that. Your reaction there was, right?
Yeah, right.
Because you actually can feel that, right? Thinking, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
That's what you're striving for, right?
Yeah.
So you need to get the information you're giving, but also do it in a way that makes people actually make them do exactly what you did. Says,
they're human. Yeah. Make it human.
But even that was a realization for you, right? This is something you've had all the time. Maybe it was getting older, that, but presented that way just makes it private home a little bit more, it's more pertinent.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels
and also
more,
bring many things into perspective, right?
Yeah. There's some emotion behind that too. Maybe that's a little sad, to think about, like, oh no, I might have to think about retiring, and you think about, what am I going to do? And you think about, well, am I going to be on a fixed income? What does that mean? That brings up a lot of those kind of emotional questions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like just
and that's
getting
completely
older.
different than saying, baby boomers getting close to the retirement. People have heard us, okay, I got it.
Right. Right.
But, so there you go. There's our aha moment.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So I'm curious now, going forward in the future with AI and all these things, what do you see happening to the visualizations and all the things we're talking about, and even to your accelerator model? How is that going to impact? What do you see happening, and what interests you moving forward in terms of, even to better visualize insight?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously a human algorithm that I'm talking about, the 4 steps. It's all taking place in the human mind, essentially, or between human minds if you're collaborating with people, right? And there are things that I think AI can help us do faster, maybe just from the categorization angle, things like that. But when it comes to forming connections, when it comes to creating metaphor, when it comes to, because here's the thing, I don't know if you've looked at perception, just studies on perception and the way human beings see, right? But perception is one of the key areas that in cybernetics and AI, they haven't really been able to solve that problem, because the way human beings see is still a mystery to some degree. From a neuroscience perspective, not just from an optical perspective, like we understand the eye is a lens and all that stuff, right? But how we perceive the world and how we move through it, seeing and perception is connected to us having a body that moves through the world. So as we see things, we see tools, again, that we use for our survival, like I talked about, right? Because the things that are around us, we can't perceive everything all at once. Like you can't focus on this conversation and your refrigerator buzzing, and maybe your dog just walked by, and maybe the LED is flickering just a little bit, and maybe your plant grew 0.0000 of a centimeter, and all these things are noise all around us. And if we heard all of that,
interesting that humans do absorb all that stuff somehow in their subconscious.
Yes,
it's in the subconscious, right? Like even when you're talking to me, it's not just you're listening or we're listening to each other. You're also observing facial expressions, tonality. I mean, all these things, but you need the time to think about that, right? Yes. And so that is ultimately perception is another way of saying really understanding what the subconscious has processed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because ultimately, yeah, what 95% of our decisions are made by our subconscious, not our conscious mind. Even though
Yes.
we all think we're very rational, conscious human beings, there's
Yes.
so many things that are ultimately driving. It's your gut feeling, right? It's that sixth sense
Yes.
that's there,
Exactly.
and that's what you're talking about is getting to that perception, is at least and peeling a little bit to understand what's the real perception that people might
Yeah,
be thinking and feeling.
absolutely. Because what's stated is just the thing that was in their conscious mind, but all the other things are still there. They're just not top of mind. They might be if you drop acid or something or do mushrooms, then all those things you might sense all those things. You know what I mean? But like day to
And that would
day,
be
you're,
quite a focus group.
oh man, let's write a proposal later after this. But you know, day to day, you're not on mushrooms. And so you're only focused on the things that you perceive as, important in the moment, right? AI can't really perceive in the way that humans do. They don't see things as tools for survival. This is why we do captchas, because they'll see shapes or patterns of light or pixels. And we have to tell them, well, that's fire hydrant. Well, that's a bike. Well, that's not this is why we have images of AI with 6 fingers and things like that. And it's like, okay. So when it comes to visualization, we're pulling from our human experience, even our subconscious experience, to create metaphor and poetry and connections that come from us moving through the world as human beings who move through our environment, right, from A to B because this is how we survive in the world. And so we understand our respondents from a human level when we're talking about whether it's CPG or we're talking about tech or we're talking about cars or we're advertising, whatever it is, we can connect with them and form those metaphors and those connections. I don't see AI doing that, right? I see it analyzing pixels or words on a page and using language models to create categories. But those pillars and those frameworks we talked about, they have a human element that's rooted in our experience. And that human experience is not something I think will be replicated anytime soon.
I agree. And I think AI is a bit of a misnomer in a way also.
Yes.
It's to me, it's not artificial intelligence. It's more automated intelligence, right?
If it's even
And
intelligence, yeah.
well, it is in the sense that it's taking a lot of data and compiling it and synthesizing it. But the artificial part, you're talking about the emotional component of humans, right? And you're right. No matter
Mhm.
what industry you're talking about, at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to humans. And to understand the emotional components, humans are complex. In many ways,
Yeah,
there's simplicity, but it's also complex. But to
yeah.
understand that, they may eventually get there, but I don't see that either in terms of the emotional component that's coming in. But I think it's going to be interesting, right? Either way, it's going to be interesting.
It will
And
be able to spit out frequencies and kind of basic data dumps. And so this is also why I emphasize the Insights Accelerator framework, that because it's a way of digging deep and pulling out those pillars and those insights and those frameworks and those visualizations, because without that, for your own survival, you got to get a few steps ahead of AI. If you're just data dumping, if you're doing, you know what I mean, just answering question by question it can do that. That's not going to be anything that's going to differentiate you from whatever tools are out there that can be used by our clients to look at a data set and spit out some slides.
if you could have lunch or dinner with anyone in the world of insights or visualization, who would it be and why?
Yeah, me in 10 years. Yeah, seriously. I'm really, really excited to see where this goes. I'm really, really excited to see what the next evolution of this is, because it's a big problem to solve, right? Because I'm not in a vacuum. Like I said earlier, I am creating a human algorithm in a world of AI. I'm excited to see what that looks like. You know what I mean? Like Neuralink was tested the other day. I got my work cut out for me. You know what I mean?
I like the answer. You're
Yeah.
the first person who ever said me in 10 years.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot you want to learn between now and then, and you want to
Yeah.
see what you've learned and explored and the
Yeah.
conclusions you've come to, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm really excited about that for sure.
But what's not going to change are the core things that actually drive people.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even though we're trying to get these insights and these core things, ultimately there's still a set number of drivers that ultimately motivate and drive people.
Yes. People want to save time. People want to save money. People don't want life to be hard.
I just had a talk recently, and I said if you can do one of three things, your chance of being successful are very good.
Yeah.
And if you can do all three, it goes from 1x, 2x to 3x. And so what are those three things? If you can save people time, money, or make it easier.
Yes.
If you can do any one of those things, your chance of being successful is 1x.
Yeah.
But if you can do all three, I would say it's 3x.
Yeah, exactly.
And breaking my rule of three, there's a fourth one.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And that fourth one, if you can evoke an emotion, now we're talking, I don't know, 6x, 10x, 12x. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
And that's a very interesting variable that could go exponential. It depends on the emotion and the depth of the emotion you're evoking.
If I could build on that too, and shout out to Alex Hormozy for this. He wrote $100 Million Offers. That's another. I'm just going to drop books on people. Read that one. That's a great book to read. It's none of these books are written, by insights folks, but still they are completely relevant. The perceived likelihood of success. If you can give people sell people on the dream that we're going to save you time, like you said, we're going to reduce the amount of effort you have to expend on this thing and make it so that you're going to actually achieve the thing you're setting out to achieve. That's such a huge driver for folks. That's so huge.
I'll give you a perfect example, and I think you'll agree, being a musician and artist. How did you first feel when you heard the announcement of the iPod that first came out, right? Because it was everything, right? There were MP3 players that were around for decades, right? Not decades, but been around for a while. And then you had these CD players. But I still remember that moment that Jobs got up and said, now you can take 1,000 songs in your pocket. It's like, what? Right at that time. But he knew that the industry, that hard drives are coming down in cost and size. He knew he could come up with a solution. But not only that, he targeted a number of 1,000 songs in your pocket. And at that time, I was like, really? That's more than my CD collection, right?
Yeah. The big book we keep in our car under the seat. Yeah.
But there was that emotional element, a flywheel. What the heck is that? I've never done that. That's so cool. I can go through all 1,000 like in one, turn of the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, didn't you feel that when that was first announced?
100%. I wanted it immediately. Yeah, because I was always I was never without my Discman. Right. At that time maybe I was still in college or just out, I can't remember, but I always had headphones on. I always had my Discman. I always had my CDs on me. And if they got scratched and started skipping, I'd go and repurchase it immediately. You know what I mean? It was just 24/7 I was listening to music. And if it had been left up to anyone other than Steve Jobs, I guess, to design this thing, what would we have? Like a Discman that can hold more CDs? Like, what would the solution have been? So it was like the thing I knew I wanted all along. And in this one aha moment, it was like, yes, that's it. That's it. I don't want to carry around my CDs, but I do want 1,000 songs.
I mean, you knew instantly, right? As soon as they said 1,000 songs in your pocket, like, I'm in.
That's right. And it's not going to skip. I want that.
And not only that, you did something else too, I bet.
Huh.
You told others.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you told others. And you told others.
Oh, yeah. Immediately.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
One of my friends got one as a bonus at work, and he let me borrow it, and it was hard to give it back. It's like, hey Vic, I might give you back.
I lost it.
Yeah. No. I went and bought I gave him back his iPod, and I went and bought it was the iPod Photo. And that was cool for me because as an artist, I could have my portfolio on my iPod at the same time. So it was like, I have a hard drive with all my music and all my image. Like it was everything I needed, which,
I'm done.
of course, now it's a phone, right? But
well, the third thing you needed was the phone. And then, of course, the iPhone came. But yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Right. I mean, that's a great example of making something cheaper, save you time, and it's much easier. But then it was that emotional factor, right? It wasn't just, just scrolling. It was this flywheel. And it had the sound, the feel, the whole thing.
Everything.
And it was like, now that is cool. Right.
It was extremely cool. Yeah, it was it was life-changing as somebody who's like a huge music fan to be able to have and not make that choice of like, well, what am I going to listen to today? Because you'd have to do that at the beginning of the day and commit to those like few CDs you could carry.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, today I'm going to listen
Yeah,
to
you got
The
to make it.
Perfect
You have
Circle, and
to
then like,
pre-select what you want to select later. It's
yeah.
Like,
And then it
but
was
then
like,
once this
yeah,
came out, it's like this makes so much sense. Like, why didn't anybody else think of it?
yeah,
And that's the insight, right? That is
exactly.
the insight.
That's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for.
Well, listen, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for a great conversation and podcast, and I look forward to talking to you. Maybe not in 10 years, but in between and 10 years to see what you're learning and what your insights you've gained. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is great.
I look
Darshan.
forward to
really
that.
appreciate it.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.